Buddy, and welcome to the live stream. Here we are. It's Sunday, and I'm in London at the moment, and it's great to have so many people already joining and loads of questions and comments and so on. So let's get started straight away with a couple of bits and pieces, a couple of housekeeping, and as I mentioned in the overall thumbnail, the advert for the thing, I'm also going to be talking a little bit about an upcoming cruise. So just a reminder, this is a live stream. So if you wanted to ask a question, write the word question at the beginning so that I know that that's a question. It's not just part of the chit chat. And if you're watching this afterwards, bear in mind, everything that you hear today is driven by questions. I mentioned it before, a lot of people say, oh, I don't like this form of video. It is very much a live stream and you can watch and replay. A lot of people do watch and replay, so that's fantastic. So I did mention that I was going to talk a little bit about cruises, upcoming cruises, things I've got planned, and talk about a cruise that I've actually squeezed in this year beyond my existing plans. So let me just remind you, first of all, my next cruise coming up is one I'm really looking forward to, although I look forward to all my cruises, I guess. But this one is because it's one of the most discussed lines at the moment, which is Explora Journeys, which of course is the luxury product set up by MSC Cruises. So overall views are very strong, although I have been following more recent reviews, which are getting a little bit more mixed, I guess, as the ships are selling fuller and things that are working, not working out. Some things that people are complaining about, I'm experiencing that in some of the pre-cruise stuff. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. I'm really looking forward to that. This is the itinerary. So out of Barcelona, going to Motril, which I've never been to, going to Tangier and Casablanca, both of which I have been to, but not for a very, very, very long time. So looking forward to that. Some Canary Island stops back to Gibraltar and Barcelona. So really looking forward to that. That's on the 3rd of April. So lots to report. And then we'll see how the Wi-Fi goes. We'll be able to do live streams from that. While I'm talking about live streams, before I get into the next cruise coming up, I just want to let you know that next weekend, so I guess it's at the 22nd, so on whatever the next weekend is. So on the Saturday, a much promised video will be coming out, which is around how to cruise to Antarctica for less and all the kind of value options and different options. I did work on that with Martin Johnson from Polar Routes. So they have a specialist travel agent, that's the word I'm looking for. And I worked with him to develop lots of stuff around how you can cruise to Antarctica. And in fact, the polar regions, generally speaking, for much less. So that will be the video. And then he's going to join me on the live stream next weekend. So if you go to the channel, you'll see that you can put a click there to remind yourself. So let me talk before I get into the questions around the cruise that I've booked. So basically, if you go to my channel, to my blog, tipsfortravelers.com, you'll see a little thing there, which is called something like future cruises. And I list all the cruises that I've got booked, but I actually had a big gap in between this year. I was going to cruise a little bit less because I'm going on lots of long cruises. So I was actually going to cruise a little bit less. And so, but I was at home for 9 weeks and I found that I just needed to have another cruise. So one of the things that I have been asked a lot to do is to update my European river cruising content. So I haven't been on a European river cruise since 2019, so pre kind of pandemic shutdown. Since then, I've been on a Mekong river cruise, I've been on a Nile river cruise, but I haven't been back in Europe. So I'm really keen to do that. So I'm going to be heading back in July, and I'm going to tell you what's quite interesting as a way to book, because it also links to a question that I've seen already in the chat. So I'm going to go on Avalon. So I'm going back on Avalon Waterways. Now, I spent a lot of time thinking about which line I would go with. Now, Avalon, currently, I've been doing some analysis looking at the reviews of river cruise lines. I did a video about it recently. And Avalon is actually the highest scoring of the river cruise lines at the moment. It's obviously not the most premium line at the moment. It's sort of that sort of 4-ish, 5-star. I have been on them before, but anyway, so I thought it'd be good to go back. So going back to the Rhine, I've done the Danube a couple of times. I've been on the Rhine for a very long time. So my more recent ones were on the Danube. So I'm going to go on the Rhine from Amsterdam, Cologne, Rudesheim, Mainz for Heidelberg, Strasbourg, which is very beautiful, and then fly back from Basel. So that's 7 nights in July. Now, what's very interesting about this is looking for late minute cruises can always be a little bit challenging in terms of pricing and that sort of stuff. But actually, I found quite a lot of availability still for river cruising in Europe across most of the lines, or many of the lines, particularly the lines that have big fleets. But actually, what was great about Avalon is not only was there a lot of availability, so I could get a cabin that I wanted, but also there was surprisingly a lot of empty cabins, and also they were doing a solo deal. So I got a solo deal on that instead of, because river cruising is pretty expensive anyway. So that was very interesting. So that's what I'll be doing. But before I do that, I do have a couple of other cruises coming up. So after that one, I've got a couple of princess cruises and stuff. We'll talk about that as we get into that. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. So let's get stuck into the questions. I'm very excited to head back onto river cruising. I have a sort of a love-hate relationship with river cruising. So it's really interesting to see what I've also seen, which appears to be an Avalon, by the way, is they become a bit more flexible with dining. They really cranked up their active excursions and so on. Right, so loads and loads of questions. So let's get stuck into them. I'll sort of go through them as quickly as I can and try and get as many, and if not all of them, done before we end up from our hours up. So what is your opinion of Fred Olsen Cruises? Warren is asking me. Good to see you, Warren. So Fred Olsen, I haven't been on Fred Olsen for a while. I am intrigued by Fred Olsen because they bought 2 of the Holland America ships, which are in their fleet, which are Borealis and Bolette now, but I haven't been on them. I'm very intrigued. They are very classic, very British, so very classic, lots of still dressing up, kind of, bow ties and kind of stuff. It's probably one of the still most dressy kind of lines in terms of that kind of, formal night stuff, but very classic, very traditional, and pretty good value. And some quite interesting itineraries. They sell out of the UK, so ex-UK departures. Definitely one worth having a look at. People who love Fred Olsen are absolute diehards. I mean, when I went on, people would have 6, 7 cruises kind of all booked up. John asking the question, beautiful morning in Los Angeles. Is Oceania's Serena ship still a nice ship for a 3-week voyage, Cape Town to Lisbon, considering its age? A lot of it, I mean, I really like these old R-class ships, but you're right, it is an older ship. I mean, really important is the bathrooms are tiny, tiny, tiny. So if you are going in anything other than their continental club, or they call their suites, the bathrooms are really tiny. So for 3 weeks, it could be a little bit tiresome. I've only been on for week-long cruises on the sister ships, but I really like the ships. They're small, they're quaint. The advantage of that itinerary is they'll be going to lots of interesting ports, of course. But but if you haven't been on those ships before and you're coming into 3 weeks, with caution, I guess. But I do really like those. But people are very split by those. So Rebecca, hi there, Rebecca. Just booked my first Cunard cruise. I usually cruise with Royal and Disney. What differences should I expect, and anything special I should take? Well, Rebecca, you should probably expect almost everything to be different in many ways. So I'm being a little bit dramatic there, but not really. They are a very different line to Royal and Disney. So of course, on Royal Caribbean, those are packed full of features, big production shows, lots of named shows, huge amounts of entertainment. It's very much around the kind of the hardware, if you like, the monstrous big casinos, particularly if you've been on the bigger Royal ships. Disney, of course, you've got the characters and the theming and lots of activities. Cunard is quite different. Cunard is very traditional, very classic cruise line. There is, although it's slowly been dialed back. You're going to have more formal nights where people will dress up. If you don't want to dress up, obviously you can go to depending on which ship you're on, King's Court or the Lido or whatever, the buffet restaurant. They do have some restrictions theoretically on where you can go if you're not in formal gear. So you theoretically can go to the casino, of course, because they want the money. But theoretically, you can't go to the theater, but you can go to Corinthia Lounge and that kind of stuff. But it is a little bit more dressed up. It's more classic. So you're going to find, your entertainment is going to be enrichment. So you're going to have maybe 4 enrichment lecturers on, normally have 4 enrichment lecturers, sort of one sort of headline, but it's going to be enrichment. You're going to have dance classes. If you're on, obviously, Queen Mary 2, which model is behind me there, you can have the planetarium, although it's very dated now. Afternoon tea is a big feature. So it's going to be much more sedate than you're going to find on Royal and Disney, which are busy, packed, whatever. You're also very likely to have not that many kids on, depending on when you're going. It doesn't need to have a lot of kids on. Obviously, both Royal and Disney tend to have more many more kids on. In terms of special, you should just have a look and decide how you're going to embrace the dress code. Formal nights are not, a lot of people get very glammed up. So just decide kind of what you want to take from that perspective. Party Mafia, what are your thoughts on themed cruises? Are they really worth the jacked up prices? Well, I would say absolutely, if that is what you're very interested in. So for example, I'm a big fan of Star Trek. I have not got on a Star Trek cruise yet. It keeps clashing with dates that I want to go on. But I would go on that because I want the whole Star Trek experience. I want to meet the stars. I want to have the fans, the parties, the dressing up that people do, the Q&As, all that kind of stuff. So obviously there's a lot layered on. So if you're very interested, then absolutely. So someone that was actually one of my channel member patrons, she went on a Hallmark cruise because she's a massive big fan of Hallmark movies, and was very excited because they met some of the stars. On Hallmark movies, a lot of the stars kind of keep doing the different movies. They move between the movies, as it were. She was very excited, had a great time. So a lot of it hinges on if you're really passionate about a topic and you want to be with like-minded people, as it were. By the way, there's a site which sort of fell away and then came back, which is called Themed Cruise Finder, which is great for finding themed cruises. Everything from needlepoint knitting through to, of course, this big Star Trek. Some of the boy bands have got them 90s themes, that kind of stuff, and they're not always massively jacked up. Those big themed ones are, but if it's a smaller scale one, it's less so. Tom, good to see you. Hello, Gary. A number of the airlines, Delta, American, and retailers Costco, Abercrombie and Fitch have lowered their revenue forecasts. Has there been any weakening of cruise bookings? So, Tom, in terms of all of the recent updates, because they're doing every quarter by the cruise lines, there has not been any reported weakening of cruise bookings as of yet. But obviously, with all the uncertainty, both from what's going on with the war, not going on with the war in Ukraine, is there going to be peace, is there going to be peace, or the instability with tariffs, and will there be inflation, won't there be inflation, economic challenges. I mean, even the UK had very disappointing economic stuff before even you worry about any of the changes coming or not coming. So they haven't reported any. Now, very importantly, one of the things that's very interesting, a lot of them have sold a lot of 2025 already. Now, saying that, I actually had lunch with a friend of mine who works for, well, someone who I've become friendly with for over many years, probably about 15 years, something like, no, maybe not that long, maybe 10 years, who works for one of the cruise lines. Now, I probably won't say which one, just because it'll probably kill me if I say it. But we were talking a lot about what a cruise booking is like, not like. There seems to be quite a lot of kind of flash sales happening at the moment as we head towards in the first quarter. What she was saying is that across many of the brands, the wave season, which was sort of the beginning of the year, is normally a really big sales period, and they do expect to sell a lot in the wave period. But the wave period was a little bit softer than it has been in the past. Now, because one of the things I did notice is you'll see quite a lot of ads popping up for flash sales. And it's important because we're coming up to the end of a quarter. So I'm guessing the sales teams and stuff had a kind of a target to hit. So it could be that. But overall, what the cruise lines are saying is less so. Now, what we'll maybe get a better perspective in a couple of months' time, whether we see people are being more cautious with booking, etc. Certainly, I haven't seen. So it's interesting. A lot of those are US. I guess from a US perspective, I haven't seen the airlines in Europe yet doing that, but I will definitely keep an eye out for that as well, and particularly the cruise ones. Chris, hi there, good to see Chris, regular and asked lots of great questions. Looking to do the Eastern Med, Kotor, Dubrovnik, Split, Venice, very nice. Are there any current solar deals on ships you like? I like the smaller docking port type, not a fan of 6,000 feet. So the one, no, I don't know any offhand, Chris. So as you know, solar deals are what you should absolutely do is sign up for the email newsletter, so if any solar deals come out, they will be announced in that. Crystal was doing a lot of solar deals currently on a lot of sailings. I don't know if they're doing the Eastern Med, but I guess you're talking your Azamara Windstar is what you're really talking about there, Oceania. But I haven't seen any solar deals on those. There are a couple places, if you look at Vacations to Go, they have a little tab there, solar, which does bring up kind of any current solar deals. And there's a couple of specialist online travel agents that also list those that are worth looking at. I can't remember the names of those, but if you look at my solar video, you just go to the channel, put solo in, it'll come up there. And I think also in the description, but in the video, I talk about a couple of special ones where you can just look and see if there's any current goings. Tom, I didn't quite understand your question. What is the financial rankings best to most exposed? Oh, I see. Best to most exposed cruise lines. And so on, and they all certainly are reporting fairly strong financial. Obviously, they're still paying back lots of debt. So I can see how a couple of times the visual has frozen. I can see that my Wi-Fi is playing up a little bit, but certainly hopefully the audio keeps going. But I can see certainly it's frozen. So hopefully that's sort of working okay, even though it is freezing a little bit there. So sorry about that. It's always the thing. I run all my tests and do all my tests, and then of course, I guess it depends a little bit on what's happening at the time. Hopefully that's calmed down a bit. So let's have a look. Now, Neil, I haven't actually heard. So Neil's asking about Amazon River cruises, which one you've heard good things about. I haven't actually heard about Amazon River cruises. I haven't really followed that, so I don't have any perspective on that. I know there are, in fact, Mark McDaniels, who follows the channels on a big Silversea cruise at the moment. They're sort of a little bit down the Amazon. He showed me some of these river cruises that head down there, but they're very rough and ready. They're kind of ferries, and you bring your own hammock stuff, and it takes days down there. So I don't know if there's any more upmarket ones. So I don't really know. I haven't looked at it, so I don't know, unfortunately, Neil. So if anyone does have a better perspective, please pop that in. Vietnam and beyond, I also don't know the answer to this, I'm afraid. River cruising on Viking from Bucharest to Amsterdam in July. I'm looking for more excursion vendors with more options of value. Can't seem to find any idea. So I don't know anybody that specifically links to river cruises. Obviously, Viator is always a good place to look because they obviously do link to land-based travelers, but they also, by definition, will link a lot to excursions that will work for river cruising. So I would look at Viator. That's sort of my go-to one. And often, if you look at Viator, you can sometimes sort of figure out from a tour. You can sort of then kind of Google that tour, and you might find out who the provider is. But Viator would be my main kind of suggestion. ICA is in Bavaria, which is chilly. It's nice and sunny in London, but getting chilly. It's like we just don't seem to be heading anywhere into spring. Fraser Seas here, which is great. And I think you asked a question a bit later, Fraser, so we will have a look at that. The Boca Boys on Explora. So I mean, it's very interesting on Explora because, as I was saying, that overall, comments are very, very positive, and it's just interesting. I've seen more, maybe it's because more people are going and stuff. I've just seen a little bit of softening of it, but if you look at their scores and their overall stuff, a lot of it's more around some of the logistics side that people got frustrated with. And certainly, I've had some very frustrating experiences with the sort of the back office side not really working and left arm not knowing what right arm's doing. But certainly the ships look great. The food apparently is great. So I'm really looking forward to that. Bel Exar of all, I like that's good. That's a good way of making the question part really pop there. Like the little design feature. Of all the cruises / trips you've been on, which did you find the most surprising in that it was different from what you expected? I think probably it comes back to Antarctica in many ways, because I had expected Antarctica to be phenomenal, and it way exceeded anything I had expected. The problem when you always have very high expectations is, the danger is it's almost impossible for them to be matched. But I would say that was still probably, it was just, it was also very different. It was a quite emotional experience, which I hadn't really expected. I'm trying to think if there's any others that have been sort of underwhelming. I can't think of any. If I do think of some, I will definitely throw those in. Jeff is here, great, from Celebrity Equinox. Hope you're having a great time. And we'll see you in May on Paul and Carol's group cruise. Rebecca, I'm going to visit London for 4 to 5 days before my cruise. What would you suggest I do, or is there a site that can tell me things to do? So I can do even better than that. I have a video that I made. I made it quite a long time ago. I'm just going to make a note to myself, Rebecca. London. I will put in the description of this live stream a link to my 10 things to do in London video. And they cover, for me, what are the must-do things. So I won't spend a huge amount of time on those necessarily, but I really focus on the kind of the iconic things that, particularly if it's I don't know if you're a first-time visitor, but particularly a first-time visitor should do. So it's covering, Tower of London and Tower Bridge and that kind of stuff. But there's a couple of other things that I would just throw in there, which I touch on as well. But particularly if you're interested in history, of course, there's some phenomenal things that you can do. So I cover in that things like the British Museum, the Tate, that kind of stuff. But there's some quite interesting things like Churchill's War rooms, which are underneath Downing Street, for example, which are really fascinating. The Imperial War Museum is really fascinating. That kind of stuff. But I will leave that in there because I'll pop that in there because that'll probably do a better job than me sort of riffing on it. I'm trying to think if there's anything that's new. I don't think, since I did that video, I haven't really updated that video because it's kind of in London, there's kind of almost the classic things to do. So I'm going to be missing Francis, unfortunately, by the looks of it, going to be there. So have a great time in the UK. Hopefully we have a nice warm April. It's been pretty miserable. Stacey asking, do you have a review of the Sun Princess? I don't, but I will by July. So in May, I'm going on Sky Princess, which I think is my 3rd or 4th time. Paul and Carol, Paul and Carol love to travel. I'm going on there. I'm booked on their group cruise. And then in June, I'm doing Sun Princess. I really want to try out Sun Princess, particularly to see, it's kind of a mega ship. It's really big. And so I'm really, really intrigued to have a look at that. So I'm on that in June. So probably by July, I will have a review out. There's quite a few other people have done it. I'm trying to think who's done Sun Princess reviews recently. Welcome, boys. Good to see you here. Always have good questions, of course. What are your thoughts on the lack of inclusions with Four Seasons yachts? $20,000 for a cabin for a typical 7-night sailing. I haven't looked a lot at Four Seasons. I'm obviously on the mailing list to make sure I'm getting their bits and pieces and their stuff. But, it's very interesting because I've seen a little bit with Ritz-Carlton, which is also crazy expensive. And it does seem that those are following so much more a hotel approach, and almost in some ways are almost ignoring coming from a cruising perspective. Now, my understanding, I haven't been on the Ritz-Carlton product, but actually someone I know worked for a short time on the ship. I'm not sure they had a great time because they left. They didn't do very much. They did maybe one contract and didn't go back. And then I know a few people who've been on it. And what they were saying is their experience on those ships is that they found it's very heavily pulling from the hotel guest. So actually they're creating an experience that the hotel guest is actually quite used to and doesn't see as unusual. So certainly that seems to be the thing with Ritz-Carlton. Now, Ritz-Carlton does have more inclusions. So I'm sort of not surprised. I mean, certainly with us coming in, it seems as crazy because that's what, when we look at our Regents and our Crystals and so on. But I just think they may be just approaching with a very different mindset. And maybe they're not bothered about what us as cruises think. But to me, it's like, it's crazy. I haven't gone to Ritz-Carlton just because to me, it just seems, I just think it's crazy pricing. Christina, is there any location in the Caribbean that you would recommend visiting without taking a cruise to get there? Well, Christina, there are quite a few islands in the Caribbean that don't take cruises, particularly some of the smaller ones. So I would almost look at I'm trying to think now of, because I haven't been to them, I guess I don't know, but I'm trying to think of where yes, does Guadeloupe I can't remember if cruises go to Guadeloupe. I'm quite intrigued by that because they actually film. There's a TV show in the UK which they film there. It's like a murder mystery kind of police thing. That really intrigues me, but I don't know whether you can actually fly there, a cruise there or not. So I'm probably a bit rubbish. Rosemary, oh, you're in London for a couple of days in September. Fantastic. I think I'm going to, depending on when you're there, I may or may not get to see you because I'm away a big chunk of September. But what is the best place for afternoon tea? Well, there are so many places for afternoon tea. What I often recommend to people is to consider Fortnum and Mason's on Piccadilly, just because it's such an iconic and famous store. And they do an incredible afternoon tea. They have a whole floor on the 4th floor. And so it's kind of iconic and it's famous, both the history, it's got a royal warrant. The actual tea room was opened by the late Queen, Camilla, the current Queen, and Catherine, so the current Princess of Wales. So it was opened by the three of them together. So there's a lot of kind of history and stuff in there. Now, there's a couple of places that are great, which we're actually going to next weekend. My sister and my mother-in-law are coming to stay next weekend, and we're going to afternoon tea. And we're going to the Langham, which is opposite the BBC. They do an incredible afternoon tea. Now, both of those are pretty costly, so if it's a real big event, but I'm guessing that. Obviously, if you want to be even more iconic, you could go to the Ritz, where you'd have to get very dressed up. But I think Fortnum & Mason's Rosemary would be a good one to consider, just because it's kind of got so much kind of like history and icon. Also, there's great location because you're near Piccadilly Circus and that sort of stuff. Boca Boys, actually, I mean, it's interesting because coming back to your point, I'm really intrigued, first of all, why Celebrity are doing it. I'm not really sure what they're going to bring differently. So I'm really intrigued to see what they do, because the ships can only be so long, so high, by definition, to go on the rivers in Europe. So what they can do in the ship is going to be extremely limited from a functions and features perspective, also to make the numbers work. So the ships can't be very big unless they go only in the Danube, where you've got Amber Waterways have got the Magna, which is a double-sized ship, but and very, very limited on where it can go. I mean, they're talking about bringing 3 ships. I'm not sure they want to put them on the Danube. So I'm really intrigued, because from a hardware perspective, what they can do is so limited, because you're going to want to have at least 140 to 190 guests to make the numbers work, and the price is not too crazy, which means you have very little real estate to do anything. So I'm really, really intrigued. I'm intrigued why they're doing it. I'm a little bit skeptical, to be honest, but it's great that people are trying, and so I'm really intrigued what they think they're going to bring different, because even from an excursion perspective, when you're on the rivers of Europe, your excursions are relatively limited, because you're in old towns where you've got castles, cathedrals, cobble streets, and you've got some wine places nearby, some chateaus, that kind of stuff. So also what you can do is pretty limited, and it tends to be quite heavily focused on European history and culture. Obviously, you can do cycle tours and stuff, but still, it's very linked to that. So I'm really, really, really interested to when they bring more specifics out. So I can see it's dropping there about the Mike and Carrie. Good to see you. Yes, so good point about the time change. The UK doesn't change times until the weekend after next. So both this weekend and next weekend, because it's 5 p.m. in the UK, it's going to be the 10 a.m. Pacific time and the 1 p.m. Eastern time. But from the very last weekend, that will then change. But you're right, it's a little bit frustrating. Mark, after last week's show, we booked Cunard Queen Anne for August 25th for Spain and Italy in Queen's Court for my wife, myself, and my 15-year-old son. How do we maximize the experience? So, Mark, I will probably actually pop in my Cunard video. I'm going to make that note, because I think that is really what it will be about. So I think a little bit like probably what I said to the lady earlier. Who it was, what her name was. Sorry about that if I've forgotten your name already. It's around really looking to embrace that whole experience. It's so being August, you're probably going to have more kids on board, so there's probably going to be more teens and stuff for your son to engage with. They do have a teens club and a kids club, and they will crank up the activities. I would also make sure, because you're on Queen Anne, they have some quite interesting cabaret entertainment in the Bright Lights Society. So as soon as you can, I would book those. I think you can book them in advance, but if not, book them when you're on there. They have 2 different shows, but definitely go to those. They're really good fun. But the rest of it's kind of just embracing that hot experience. Of course, being in Queen's Grill, you can order off menu. They have items there that you can order. You can order things off menu. And particularly your son might enjoy some of the stuff when they come and do the stuff by the table side. That's quite fun. Let's have a look. Just remember to write the word questions so I don't forget, so I don't miss you. Shadrad, what cruise insurance do you recommend? So insurance is very dependent on country, but basically, what you need to make sure whenever you take out insurance for a cruise, do make sure that it's got cruise specific cover, because many of the insurance companies will offer insurance, and then if you're going on a cruise, you need to pay a slight premium. Now, some of them already include cruise, so just check that it's got cruise cover, because obviously cruise cover means that if you have to medevaced and stuff like that, that is covered. So that's probably the most important thing I would say. So make sure it's done. Also, you can do things like missed ports, for example. Some policies will cover you if you miss ports, they'll pay you out. But also really important, make sure you have insurance at the time of booking, because as you know, you have to pay final balance 90 days before, and the cruise lines are, cancellation penalties are very strict, as it were. So you often end up missing out there. Tom's saying the Facebook link not working. I will check that. I'll do a thing afterwards if they have a problem, because I use on StreamYard, so sometimes it goes a little bit out of sync. But I will check that. Steinwald, Madchen, how do you compare Holland America with small ships for slightly more exotic itineraries, South America, Panama Canal? So a lot of it depends on which size ship, because obviously they have got the more Vista class ships, which are about 2,000. They've got the bigger ships. So I have done Holland America on South America, and I'm actually doing a much bigger South American trip with Holland America. And because they're quite long, what I like about the bigger ship is you just have a lot more choice, a few more choices, dining venues, more entertainment. So actually, from that perspective, there's kind of a little bit more going on the ship. On a smaller ship, obviously, it tends to be slightly lower key. I found, if you compare ports of call, when I looked at some smaller ships, a lot of the places, particularly on South America, where Holland America went and the smaller ships were going, were basically the same. So there wasn't a lot of differences. Obviously, with the Panama Canal, really important, because if you go on the smaller ship, you can get through the old canal. So on Holland America, you need to go on the smaller Vista class ships if you want to go through the old canal. The bigger ones will go through the new kind of canal locks. But certainly when I look at comparing, so for example, they did a circumnavigation of Australia. The smaller ship did have some better ports, because there are some very smaller out of the way places, so where they could tender in. It was small enough. Holland America, there's too many people to want to go to constantly to ports with tendering in. So a lot of it, the mix and match. So for example, if you go to Asia, if you've got Shanghai on the list, smaller ship much better, because you can go right into the Bund. If you're going to Vietnam, you can go into Shanghai. You're not an hour and a half out of town. So I think a lot of it hinges around which part of the world you go to would be my thing. So I think that's what you're asking. Hopefully that's what you're looking for. So Diane, hope you saw that. You might have. I don't know if you were here at the beginning of the thing, but I'm going on Explora. Is my next cruise, so you will have that. Echo Bravo. So your crew member video reinforced how grateful I am for crew efforts and did nothing to reduce my over-tipping impulses. Do you ever suggest a policy for tipping, especially in Europe? So those, I should have actually put that there. So my video this week is around things that people don't really know, in my experience, about crew. So it's things I've gained. It was sparked by some discussions I had over dinner, where I did learn things. I thought I knew a lot about the crew when I had dinner with some officers, and I realized there's a couple of things I didn't know. So I spent a little crew, both on the ship, people who used to work on the ships, and I pulled up a whole lot of things which I think are quite surprising. So that's this week's video. So take a look at that if you haven't seen that. So do I have a suggested policy for tipping, especially in Europe? I don't have anything. You'll find, generally speaking, tipping in Europe tends to be lower than in the US. So in the US, I just get flabbergasted when you see like it's now kind of your options are like 18, 20%, whatever. Certainly in Europe, it tends to be lower. You're talking more like 10, 15%. So that's really sort of where you probably want to pitch it. You will be very popular if you do. And certainly, often you won't, in my experience, in the US, people will tip the barm and a couple of dollars. That's more unusual in Europe, in my experience. So that would certainly go down very well if you do that. Steve-O just asking, do I have plans to Celebrity River Cruise when they come in 2027? I think they're coming in. I will absolutely want to try, because I really want to, as I mentioned earlier, I really want to see what on earth are they doing and bringing that is truly different. Fraser has a question. What are you most interested in about Explora? Also, what are your first impressions of Explora? I'll be intrigued to see them at Terra. So I'm most interested in overall where I think they fit within the cruising world, because and come back to I think what the Boca Boys were talking about earlier. I know they've been on. Their view was they felt it settled more within the luxury space than the ultra luxury space. Certainly, that's sort of where I suspect I might find them, because certainly the ship is way bigger than the ultra luxury ships. So I'm intrigued to see where I think they fit. I'm very intrigued to see the ships. All the tours and things I watched look very beautiful. The food it looks very good. I'm intrigued to see whether they are delivering on the sort of where they fall in the luxury, ultra luxury. The service, certainly the attention to detail has not impressed me so far. As I mentioned, the back office stuff, things like, I can't book online because I book through travel agent, and someone says that's nonsense. You should be able to book, and then you speak to someone else and they say that's a lot of nonsense. So just that kind of, it's very, they did a thing where you're supposed to fill out your preferences. The link doesn't work. So just kind of little things like that. And I have been following some critics where people are saying they've been very disappointed because when they got on board, their reservations for excursions weren't there. They lost their excursions. Their dining reservations were there. They lost their dining. But I'm very, very excited to see how that goes. Theo, we've traveled on land on our own and taken day tours. We've tipped the guides. We're taking a Viking River cruise. If we take the ship provided to us, do we tip the guides? Again, it's entirely up to you. You'll find that most people do. So, because the guides are so used to having particularly a lot of US, North American travelers, US, Canada, and so on, who tend to be more, I guess, forthcoming with tipping, they kind of do sort of expect to. So I certainly would normally tip the guides, because the guides are independent contractors. They don't work for Viking, as they're not employed. I'm sure they do a lot of their work for Viking, but they're not employed by Viking. So yes. So Boca Boys, I think I've probably so asking a question around I guess you're talking about with Seabourn. Did I learn anything more around what their plans are? So very much following the line that I think we've probably seen, sold that the other ship to the Japanese because they got an offer they couldn't refuse. Decisions on ship sales are made at kind of the corporate level rather than the brand level. Kimberly, it's expanded across, but they still see they have a lot of capacity. They are very optimistic. So I came away feeling they were quite upbeat about it. I mean, they're releasing the 27 World Cruise, which is actually a lot later than other people's, because Silversea launched their 28 River Cruise. Did I say River Cruise? World Cruise already, and Seabourn just launched their 27. But certainly I felt they were fairly focused. But again, I guess it depends what corporate has to say. But certainly they were making lots of plans, are very busy. Rosemary, I'll be staying at the President Hotel. I don't actually know the President Hotel, to be honest. I've heard of that hotel. That's probably, I guess, when you live in a town, you don't always know the ins and outs of the hotels. Is it worth booking the Fawlty Towers dining experience there? So I have never been to that. I've seen some really fun reviews. I would say if you're a big fan, go for it. There's also a Fawlty Towers West End play on as well at the moment. So you may want to balance between those two if you're a big Fawlty Towers fan. I haven't been to the Fawlty Towers. I've seen some pretty good reviews about it. So, but I can't give that on first-hand experience. The show has also got very good reviews, both from critics and from kind of punters, as it were. Steinwald Matchin, follow-up last week. If I do around the Japan plus T-Pack, I don't know what I'm not sure. I might be able to figure out what T-Pack is. And my bro, just the Japan leg, can he stay at the same cabin as you, or must he book a super room? So I'm guessing you mean you do around Japan and then you're doing a longer part of the cruise. That's what I think you're asking. Again, you have to need to double check with the cruise line, but it sounds, if they're selling them as separate legs, you're going to find it much easier to do by putting him on and stuff. But generally speaking, it should be fine, because you booked a cabin for 2 people, or you might even book a cabin for 3 people if there's 2 of you. If you book a cabin that can hold 3, if he's coming in as a 3rd person, you might find there's an extra charge for him to do that. But I often look, because I'll often book things solo and I'll add Mark on, or I'll take Mark off, or whatever. So it's normally fine. So, and the price sometimes gets adjusted. So if you've booked, say, the Round Japan as a solo, and then you want someone else to come on, there will be an adjustment upwards in the fare because they will add on port fees, for example. Or if you've booked him on and take him off, it might go down a little bit because they take port fees off. It's not a lot, but generally speaking, again, you need to just check with the line. Obviously, they need to know he's coming. He needs to be on the manifest and so on. Paul and Carol here, which is great. Good to see Paul and Carol. I'm actually, was going to give a shout out. I actually want to post about this. Paul and Carol, of course, were on my group cruise in September. A series about their time on the group cruise. The first video is out. I will actually put a link to that in the description as well. So if you're interested to know what going on a group cruise is like, and if you've never watched Paul and Carol, to get an insight into them, take a look at that. So good to see. They just booked. If you follow Paul and Carol, you've probably followed their live, where they booked a fantastic big round trip all around New Zealand, Australia, and all the islands and stuff for next year, I think it is, if I remember correctly. And the next cruise that my 3rd cruise after this one, no, am I doing a cruise in It's terrible. So my next cruise, as I mentioned, is the, so I'm just checking that I've got my facts wrong. Yeah, my next cruise in April is Explora. The one after that in May is with Paul and Carol on their group cruise. So I'll be able to be a passenger and enjoy without all the stress and running around, which will be fun. Often to the Shard, people are saying, yeah, that is pretty good. Tom just saying there's a lag in terms of the FaceTime, so thanks very much for that. Jason, what are the advantages of doing a shoulder season cruise in Alaska? So Jason, the advantages are a couple. In fact, I'm thinking actually of updating my Alaska videos. I can always see this time of the year, more of my Alaska videos kind of get a bit of uplift. I guess people are starting to plan. But anyway, so the advantage of the shoulder season is, generally speaking, it's a little bit less costly. So you've got, the peak, that July, August into September is very busy. Obviously, it's school vacation time. Ships are very full. So generally speaking, it's a little bit less costly. Ships also tend to be a little bit less manic. They still will be very busy in Alaska, but once you head into the school holiday period, where it is you're anywhere in the world, you'll find a lot of multi-generational families. You'll find the ships are very, very full, because many cabins are sailing with 4 people in, mum, dad, kids, whatever, or mom and kids and dad, whatever the combinations are these days. But you'll find it's very full. So like I've been even to late June, like, wow, it's busy. So you'll generally find ships will be a little bit quieter. Obviously the ports should by definition then be now you'll find, obviously, if you're doing at the beginning of the season, sort of the May into June, it's actually tends to rain a little bit less. So one of the advantages of going May, early June is it can be quite good weather. Once you get later, obviously it's getting a little bit colder. So the downside is, the big wildlife time is more in the July starts. But generally speaking, it's a little bit quieter, less but manic. I personally like going on in the shoulder in the shoulder seasons. Dean, I have no specific tips on Viking's Homeland cruise in May. I'm not sure I know what the Homeland cruise is, unless I'm guessing it's a Norway cruise. So I don't offhand. But if there's anyone who knows, has better tips than me, then please do. Jeff, common question, a little fancy design there. Itinerary was changed on board Celebrity Equinox Key West and Bahamas cruise due to unexpected high winds in Key West on Tuesday. Therefore, they jumbled our port days. I'm guessing there's a second part. There may be a question there. I don't know, but hopefully you get to go to all the ports. I've seen, actually, I hadn't realized until I was watching the news at lunchtime, and I then looked at it, that there's been these big, big storms going through the US with quite a few people losing their lives, which is, I hadn't realized that was, I don't know if that's a side effect of that, but it sounds pretty horrific. So that hopefully that situation kind of gets sorted and calms down. Rob, which cruise line would you recommend for a budget no-fly cruise from the UK? So Rob, in terms of some of the best budgets you're going to get is on MSC cruises. Now MSC is very divisive. Some people love them, some people absolutely hate them, but absolutely some of the sharpest prices you're going to get are on MSC, and they have ships based in the UK during the summer out of Southampton. So you will get phenomenal deals there. Now also take a look at P&O, because P&O particularly, they have shifted much more into a value line these days, particularly with the big ships, like Iona and Arvia, always pronounce it incorrectly. But soon those big ships, you can get some very good deals. Also Ambassador, which tends to be a slightly older crowd, because like MSC, you'll get lots of families and that, stuff like that. The same on same on P&O these days, much more families, particularly in the cool summer period. But Ambassador tend to be more couples kind of stuff, because they don't take kids. I think they have some very specific multi-generational cruises. And Marella is the other one. Marella is extremely popular. They are also very good value, all-inclusive kind of stuff, very famous for their very good entertainment. So you have quite a lot of choice on the budget side from a no-fly cruise out of the UK in the summer period. So let's have a look. Let me just write the word questions so I don't miss any of the questions. Luckily I didn't miss this one. What is the cruise you would recommend for a 30-year-old couple going on their first cruise in the United States? Something not too long, maybe 3 to 4 days. So I don't know how to pronounce your name, so I won't mask your name because I'm sure I'll get it wrong. So basically, if you're looking for 3 to 4 day cruises, take a look at Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, and possibly Carnival. But certainly I would take a look at Royal Caribbean and Norwegian. They sail short 3 to 4 nighters out of Florida. They do sort of longer cruises from other places, but out of Florida, you're gonna have lots of choice. So you're gonna find, high energy, lots of attractions, lots of kind of, everything from flow riders to incredible shows, lots to do. You'll find lots of 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 40-year-olds, kids stuff. It's kind of, it has a younger vibe. But the great thing is, if out of Florida, they'll to Bahamas, or they'll go to their private islands, perfect day kind of stuff. I would strongly recommend you take a look at those. I mean, you could, I would focus on those, because I'm thinking, Virgin do, I think more 5 nighters, they might do 4 nighters, but Virgin Voyages, if you do want to make sure you don't have kids and stuff, they are, they're 18 plus only. So, I mean, averages on the ships probably about 50. So it does tend to be kind of still on the younger side. You get lots of younger people, particularly on those short 3 and 4 days. So those are the ones that I would sort of focus on. So you have quite a lot of choice, actually. Okay, so Jeff, here's the second part of the question. I checked Venture Shore and Shore Excursion Group, and they both still have their old itinerary scheduled. Do they update in the situation? Viator seems like the only option. So Jeff, they tend to flex, but they often don't actually update their website, because I think, generally speaking, you have to have booked 7 days before, if I remember correctly, so on Venture Shore. So I don't know if they've still got bookings open, but they tend to close once the cruise starts, and then they will shift around for people who booked. So, but I would suggest trying to kind of emailing them or phoning. They do have contact to see if they have availability of stuff. But I think that's right. It's sort of why they sort of close down and they do more one-to-one. I think that's the situation. You're right, Viator, because they're not so linked to the itinerary, could be the answer there. Megan, is it better to book excursions before you travel and how easy to cancel? I don't want to commit too early due to traveling with elderly mum, but don't miss out. So Megan, this a little bit hinges on the cruise line that you're on. But basically what I would say is I would always book excursions early, particularly if there's ones that you really, really want to do. Because pretty much all cruise lines will allow you to cancel with, normally it's 48 hours. If you've got, say, a port the next day on embarkation day, they will normally let you cancel up to 6 p.m. on that day. It might be 5 p.m., but they'll give you a time once you've embarked to cancel. And that's without penalty. So that's very important. Now, the downside, of course, is what happens is many of the cruise lines, particularly if you're going, I don't know what cruise line you're on, but if you're going on many of the premium and even some of the luxury lines, and certainly the sort of more mass lines, you often have to pay at the time that you reserve the excursions. Now, some of the ultra luxury ones, like Silver Sea, Crystal, they only charge you once you're on board. So you have more flex there. And also, but generally speaking, they will refund the full amount. Now, I feel there's one line, but I can't remember which it is, that might have a small penalty if you cancel on board. But the downside is you might have to pay for the excursions, but you will find you'll get them back. Now, if you look whatever cruise line you're on, when you go to the excursions page, you will see terms and conditions. But I tend to book excursions that I want and cancel and get my money back. I don't think I've ever lost money on anything. I feel there's one line I did. It might have been Holland America, but just double check the terms and conditions. But I will often, any excursion that I want to do, because you don't want to miss out on excursions. So for example, when I went not so long ago on a South America trip, I knew there's going to be limited availability in all those ports, and I booked all my excursions. And then what happened is a lot of people close to the cruise, and when they're on board, went to book in the Falklands because there was, that was the only place you could see penguins. All the penguin excursions completely sold out, and people were really upset because they just couldn't get on them. But I knew that I had them because I'd got them early. Other people might have, sort of canceled them, but later on. But that would be my thing. Christina, I'm sailing on Crystal Serenity in Juno Solar Cabin. Very nice. They're very cute cabins. Do you know if they offer upgrades as we get close to the sail update, or is it an option to upgrade on board? Both of those, Christina. So what you will get closer to the cruise is they will give you an opportunity to bid for an upgrade. So they will do that. Now, what you probably want to do is, when you get that, is go and look at the sailing and see how much availability is, because the lines, they're sort of automated. So even I've been on cruises before where you've been able to bid for upgrades, and I know that the grade above are completely full. I guess it's cancellations of people not showing up. So definitely, you'll get that chance to bid. And yes, definitely once you're on board, if it's not full, you do have an opportunity to say, do you have any upgrade options? Now, Crystal is not generally selling full overall, although in June, I'm guessing you probably, by then is Serenity back in Europe. My understanding is European sailings are looking quite full when I was talking to them on board, but you have a couple of options, unlike many other lines, which will do the upgrade option, but once you're on board, they're normally selling full, so very little. But you definitely do have, more options. Dear O'Hara, we came back from Panama Canal excursion to Cartagena. It's Cartagena, if I remember correctly. I kept pronouncing it incorrectly. I got paranoid about doing the wrong pronunciation. Do you think it's too dangerous a place to be in the first place? No, I didn't find that at all. We did a walking tour of there on I'm glad I sort of went on an escort walking tour, because seeing the guides were more hassly. Fraser at Sea, who was here, I know he spoke about, he did his own self-tour there and spoke about he felt pretty safe, but did feel a bit harassed. The advantage was we had someone who just warned us, don't do that, watch out for that. So, you know, there's a little sort of scam thing with ladies with the fruit on their head, which was sort of encourage you to take a picture and then give you a hard time about giving money and stuff. So, but no, and certainly that old town, you know, it's very busy, it's very packed. There's lots of tourists and stuff around. Paul and Carol is in stereo on Facebook as well. Swift 55, I'm guessing it is. Do you still have a trip planned for Antarctica this year? Which line are you going on? So no, I have it. It's only January 27, which is the Ross Sea, and it's on Ponant. So it's not until 27, beginning of 27. So it's not this year or next year. It's beginning of the year after. So that will be my 4th time to Antarctica, which is very exciting. Polo Transformations asking about tips. We can talk a lot actually about this also next week when Martin Antarctica cruise appropriate, even the tips included. So I didn't tip the expedition leader, but I did tip my cabin stewards because they were just so fantastic. But I did tip extra just because the 2 cabin stewards I had were just brilliant. They were really good, very helpful, very proactive. They were just super. So I did. I didn't tip the expedition leader and expedition team myself, but I think some people did, but I didn't. So yeah. Helen asking the question, we're going on first cruise in a week and worried about our luggage being stolen from the hallway. Does this happen, or is it just my suspicious New York nature? So no, it doesn't. I've only ever once heard, and only heard it recently, about cruise luggage being stolen, and it was a passenger that stole the luggage in the hall, you know, after the luggage gets taken off, and they stole some luggage, and eventually got tracked down through, I think, Apple AirTags. But no, I have never heard of luggage being stolen. I did hear about when on a recent cruise where luggage got put on the wrong ship, the other way around, which is I'd never heard of before. But some luggage got put on the wrong ship, which is very unusual. I don't really know how that happened. It was in a very busy kind of port. But no, because to be honest with if a passenger took it, it's going to be almost impossible to get off ship because you can't. Well, you could, I suppose, yourself disembark. But no. But what I would encourage, lock your luggage and stuff as you would probably do anyway. I always lock my luggage. But I think it's pretty. I think it's pretty safe from that perspective. Paul Carroll just saying that Australia, South Pacific, and New Zealand is what they're doing. Tom, when will your crystal video be available? So my crystal video is, I've got actually 2 videos coming out. One is going to be focused on the crystal experience, and one going to be focusing on the ship. And they will be out. I could have a quick look. I will tell you when they are scheduled. Let me have a look. So basically what I do with my videos, since you asked the question, I'm actually going to physically look at my little schedule. So my Crystal Cruises video will come out on the 20th. They'll both come out on the 29th of March. I'm actually going to put them out at the same time because I don't do a lot of ship tours, as you know. So, and this is more focused on the ship, but it's very integral to the story. And my Crystal Cruises video would be too long. So they're due to come out on the 29th of March when they come out. But they will go out earlier. I do an early release of my videos at least a week, sometimes longer before, which will probably be the case on this one, to my patrons. So I release them early access, ad-free, at least a week before they go live on the channel. If you're interested in becoming a patron, by the way, patreon.com/tipsfortravelers. That's some of the perks amongst those bits and pieces. Let's have a quick look. Cruising tips. What is the best tip you were ever given by somebody else? Wow, that's a good challenge. What is the best tip you were ever given by somebody else? I'm going to say, and this is a little bit left field, I'm going to say the best tip I was ever given by somebody else was to go on a cruise. because I would never have ended up where I am today if I hadn't got that. So the reason I say it is my very first cruise was as a speaker on a ship that was being chartered for a marketing conference. It's when I was working in marketing, I was the marketing director of Johnson & Johnson UK at the time. And they asked, they chartered a ship once a year. It was all marketing people and advertising agencies, and they had people doing talks, and it was sort of like a sales conference thing. They had lots of suppliers selling stuff. Anyway, so they approached me and asked me if I would do a talk on that, and I was like, I like doing talks at the time, and I think they'd seen me speaking at another conference, but it was on a ship, and it's like, do I really want to go to a cruise ship? And someone else in the office had actually been on one of the ship that was going on before, and they're like, go on this ship, go. You'll not only because you'll enjoy the lecture and stuff, but I think you'll love the ship. That was probably the best tip that I've ever been given, is actually give it a go. I'm not sure that's quite what you were looking for, but that was what came into my head. I'm sure I'll probably think about that and think of something a little bit better. Jim and Cami are here, which is great. So Jim and Cami I met years ago, God, it's just before pandemic, I guess 2019, if I remember, in November, on board Insignia. So that's sort of the ship. So Cami and Jim are booked on Insignia from New York to Bermuda. Been to Bermuda many times before. Any recommendations for a hidden gem to visit? Things to see, visit or dine, anything is a play. I don't have any hidden gems. I've only gone to Bermuda once, and I don't have any hidden gems. So I'm hoping that somebody else here who's been many more times than I can absolutely give Jim and Cami a tip. So sorry to let you down, Jim and Cami, but please, if anybody's got a good tip, then please leave it for those, and have a fabulous time. Let's have a look. Rapidly on our time, so let's just do one more question. Have you ever done an inaugural cruise? Any thoughts? I basically try to avoid them if I possibly can, because they tend to be expensive. So I'm assuming that this is when the ship goes into service the first time. Now, I know some cruise lines will do an inaugural in the Caribbean when they've been sailing in Europe for a while, and they'll do an inaugural because it's the first time they've been there. But I'm assuming you're talking like maiden, first out of the blocks kind of thing. So I tend to avoid them because they tend to be pretty costly, because they're normally a premium. People want to go on them, and you can always expect probably that things aren't quite going to go to plan, because the crew are new, the ship is new, it's not firing on all cylinders, as it were. So I tend not to go. I prefer to wait a couple of months in and go. So even like when Crystal revamped, I waited for their out for a while. Even with Explora, I waited for a while. Even with Explora 2, I didn't book it when Explora 2 first came out. I waited since it's been in service a while. So I mean, if you really want to go to have the bragging rights, the whatever of going on the inaugural. So, for example, I once went to a Seabourn naming ceremony on call, and they had a whole big section of people who'd been on every single Seabourn ship maiden voyage, because that's what people did. But generally speaking, I tend to avoid those. I have been on a couple of shakedown cruises, which are quite interesting. When the ships first come out of the shipyard, they invite sort of travel agents and media and stuff for a couple of days to just to kind of dry run it. That's kind of interesting. But the problem is they often like only 30-50% full, so they're not true. So I do tend to kind of avoid those. So thanks very much, everybody, for joining me. There's a couple of questions there I just haven't quite got to there. Sorry about that. We've run out of time, but I will be back next Sunday, same time. Remember, in the US, it's slightly different to my usual times. So have a great rest of the weekend. I really appreciate you joining me. Thanks for the fantastic questions. Take care, and remember, you can go and watch that crew video now.